If you had told me that in 2019 I'd be having a whale of a time playing a game that was 90% sat on a pile of palm leaves and banging two rocks together, I'd have said you were mad. But in Ancestors the Humankind Odyssey, that's exactly the stage I was at about halfway through the game. I loved it. However, by the time I'd finished the game, my opinion has changed a little bit on it. Hi folks, I'm Mark GFL and this is my no-nonsense review of Ancestors the Humankind Odyssey. Is it worth it? Well, it's a game of two halves and I'm going to tell you all about it. But if you'd like to watch my entire playthrough of this, then just click on the link below. So the gameplay takes place between 10 million and 2 million years before the present day in human history. You're going to help our ancient ancestors evolve via discovery, exploration, experimenting, and most importantly, surviving. To sum it up basically, this is a game of survival and exploration, plus there's a puzzle solving element too, especially in the first half of the game. The game starts 10 million years ago with you in control of a family of our ape-like ancient ancestors. The idea is to keep these guys alive and safe, and of course help them breed for the future and evolve and develop new skills along the way. Although you control one of them at a time, you can ask other ones to follow you, and later on you can teach them some basic skills and get them to mimic your actions as well. Generally though, the rest of your clan members are idiots who sometimes even struggle to eat and drink for themselves if they're holding something in their hands, so there is a little bit of babysitting to do with these guys. Eating, drinking and sleeping make up the survival elements of the game, as well as the various ailments and injuries and illnesses you can pick up along the way. Now, whereas any idiot ape can just eat a few leaves off a tree or scoop some water out of a scrape in the ground, it's figuring out how to get at those tastier morsels, like opening a coconut, getting honey out of a bee's nest, butchering an animal. All that's going to lead to the future of human evolution. The game gives you no clues and no information whatsoever of how to achieve these tasks, by the way. It's all down to the player. This is the puzzle element, which is one of my favourite parts of the game. You have to figure out how to use the elements in the landscape around you, how to strip sticks, how to pick up grasses, how to alter plants or play with them, how to bang rocks together to make different simple and basic tools, and then use them on other elements in the environment. It is so rewarding when you actually figure out how to do something new, how to finally get that coconut open, and it is so good fun. And to be honest, there is quite a lot of things you can interact on in so many different ways in the game, so it's worth experimenting a lot. This is the whole experiment and puzzle side of the game. It's my favourite part of it because it feels so good when you get something right. Obviously, it wasn't just the use of tools which helped our ancestors develop, it was also an increase in the senses. In Ancestors, you've got intelligence, smell and hearing, and you can train them all just by listening for sounds of predators or other animals, smelling out food and water sources, or again, other animals, and using your intelligence to recognise things over and over. At the start of the game, this is all new stuff and new discoveries, which is all kind of cool. And it helps you recognise your surroundings and spot dangers and find food sources. Speaking of dangers, combat is a smallish part of the game. I say smallish, it happens a lot, but it is all very similar. You generally get attacked by a predator, and at the start of the game your best option is just going to be to dodge out of the way. This is very important because dodging leads to survival skills and instincts building up, but you can learn to fight back if you've armed yourself with something that can be used as a weapon, and it's quite surprising just how many items in the game can actually be used as an effective weapon. Rocks, bones, sticks and various iterations of each of those can all be used, and there are various achievements to unlock just for hitting enemies with certain objects. Although combat is quite difficult at the start, by the end of the game you're so practiced at it that it's quite easy, and the game does help. It basically just involves holding down a button until you hear a tiny little ting sound go off, and at the point of hearing that sound, that's when you release the button and choose a direction, and that will be successful. If you release too early or too late, you'll mess it up and get hit. It's a very simple system that's repeated a lot. In the early days, it feels great when you finally start hitting stuff and killing stuff and hunting stuff. By the end of the game, it starts to feel a little bit repetitive, I will say. It also in places gets utterly ridiculous when you can hit a charging rhinoceros or an elephant with a lump of granite that you've got in your hand and survive the encounter. But sticking pointy sticks into things, well, that's always good fun. Now, to make all these lovely weapons, we've got the crafting side of the game. Again, this is one of the areas that I love the most. At the start, when you're learning which rocks to bang together for how much and how often and what type and what to use everything on, it feels great. Unfortunately, there's not many tools you can actually make. There's only 3 different rocks in the game that you can really interact and alter. And the sticks that you pull off bushes are pretty much all the same once you've learned how to strip them and sharpen the points. But when you first discover these things, it really does feel so rewarding. It feels like you are progressing. And you can only imagine what our ancient ancestors must have thought when they accidentally created one of these items through trial and error, or actually figured it out, and had a usable tool or weapon at the end of it. However, by the second half of the game, you've pretty much discovered every tool that you can make and every weapon you can craft. And by that point, it's just repeating the same old actions to get the same old things again. There are some very simple constructions you can make around your clan settlement, which you can move around, by the way, as you explore the world. More on that in a minute. But these are very simple things like thorn barriers and beds, and I'll leave you to figure those out. But basically, in the crafting system, the trick is just experiment with absolutely everything. Try altering everything with your hands, try bashing everything with rocks, try grinding it, try using one item on another. It really does encourage you to experiment and try things, and I found a couple of things that I really didn't think would work just by randomly trying stuff together, and that was pretty cool. Now, exploring is probably the biggest part of the game. If you like exploring games, you'll love this because the map is absolutely huge. I mean huge. It's way bigger than you expect when you start the game, and it seems to go on forever. Just when you think you've finished the game or you've explored everything, you find more areas, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's beautiful for the most part as well. It is an explorer's dream. Now, moving into new areas often involves having to conquer your fear of the unknown. This basically depends on you having leveled up your senses a bit and being able to recognize items out there through their sight, smell, sound, so you can become familiar with the area and think, actually, it's not that scary after all. But the big problem I had with the map, you don't get an in-game map, by the way. Remember, this is 10 million years ago. It's kind of linear. It's like an elongated sausage shape with a few bulges here and there. And you start more or less in the middle of it. The downside of this is that whichever direction you go, up or down, means that at some point you're going to have to turn around when you get to the end and backtrack through everything you've come and then go all the way to the other end. And it is big and it is a long travel. And especially at the points when you have to take the tribe with you, it can be a bit of a chore getting from place to place. So the entire point of doing all this exploring and using your senses and developing your combat skills and just learning which foods you can and can't eat and when is to make the neurons in your brain develop, grow, open new neural pathways, discover new things which opens up new possibilities that eventually lead to the full evolution into what we became 2 million years ago. Now, the way to do this is mostly just to repeat actions over and over again, trying new things out, even if it seems bad at the time, like eating food that gives you the shits, or falling out of a tree and fracturing your leg. All this stuff you will eventually learn from, and it will open up new neural pathways, and you repeat, especially with crafting and making things. Dodging things in particular is good for development. All sorts of stuff. Just do it all. It'll all help your brains expand and you'll progress through the game. The trouble is, a lot of the time in this, it doesn't often make a lot of sense, or it's not very clear what you've done to unlock something. For example, I had a neural pathway that required us to eat lots of mushrooms to develop. And I did this for hours and hours and hours through the later part of the game. And it never unlocked. It never did anything. And I took the entire tribe across the map, eating mushrooms wherever I could find them. And this just didn't unlock for me. And then randomly later on, it did unlock when we were eating berries. So I don't know whether there's some time limit or there's some time delay from when you do an action to when that neuron matures. It's kind of confusing in places. Some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. It's a little bit of, I guess, trial and error and see what happens. But the real keys to unlocking and retaining these new neural abilities are your children, the next generation who'll become the adults of tomorrow. Keep them safe, make sure you've always got plenty of them, make sure you've got some in reserve for in case all your adults die off. And also, you want to be carrying 2 kids around at the whole time, because the mechanic that the game uses for you to develop this energy that's used to unlock neural pathways is gained by doing any of these actions whilst you're carrying kids around with you. It seems a bit odd, but you can kind of rationalize it by thinking, well, you're showing Junior how to do all these activities so they can develop the skills from an early age. At least that's how I see it, and really it's not a problem, but it does look a little odd when you're going into combat against saber-toothed tigers with 2 kids on your back. Okay, on to graphics and sound, and As far as the visuals to this game, I think it often looks really beautiful. I mean, if you climb up a great big rock or up to the top of a massive tree and look around, the landscapes you're presented with the right lighting, can be absolutely stunning. Speaking of the lighting, I think that's good too. It does change as the sun passes overhead. You'll see your shadows change at certain points in the day, and it gives the whole landscape and view a different outlook. I like the visuals, but then you kind of realise that for all it's excellently laid out and positioned, and everything does look very believable and real, a lot of it is the same. The bushes repeated over and over, the same grasses everywhere, and it's, well, I guess there's not a huge amount of variety, but what there is does look really good. It's kind of the same with the sound as well. In places, there are some fantastic atmospheric sounds, like when you're in the treetops and you can hear the bird calls. Some of them are absolutely beautiful, and you're looking out across these vast, gorgeous landscapes, and you get the parrot noises behind you in the trees and stuff, and it is very atmospheric, and I like it. But again, perhaps because of the setting of the world, there's not a lot of different sounds in there. Your family of apes make different grunts and groans, which do develop as you evolve through the ages, which is nice. And the last iteration that I got to, you could really detect some of the calls starting to sound like very early language. But again, a lot of it is just the same, repeated over and over. So there's not a huge variety of sound or visuals, but what there is, I think is pretty good. And now on to the good and bad about this game. It really is, for me, a game of two halves. The first half of this game, the first 25 hours I put into this, were absolutely fantastic. I loved the exploration, the sense of reward you got when you discovered a new tool or figured out how to access some new food source, or when you killed a predator for the first time, or managed to learn to dodge a predator, or just anything like that. It was fantastic because the game doesn't tell you anything at all. It really is down to you to figure it all out yourself, which gives you an amazing sense of reward when you eventually do. And that's why I've tried not to give too many spoilers in this video about how to do stuff, because that would take away, I think, a large part of the game. I will make some tips videos on this for those of you who are struggling and want some more general advice, so keep an eye out for those. But it's that sense of achievement which is really good. Also, the game is very original, which I really like to see, because so many games companies just produce copy-paste templates of other successful games in the same mold and same fashion. So it's nice to see the developers do something different and try a new theme here, and thumbs up for that. However, the second half of the game gave me quite a different feeling. By that point, I'd pretty much discovered all the tools I could make. I'd figured out how to access all the food sources. I'd attacked most of the animals and predators, or at least I'd learned what to have to do. And even when you discover new animals to attack or to defend yourself from, the combat is exactly the same. And to get over the finish line and finish the game, it just felt like a long, repetitive grind of doing exactly the same stuff after that. I didn't get any new thrills from discovering new things. There's not enough tools in the game to discover, but that's because of the period it's set in, fair enough. But you end up just repeating the same actions, the eating, drinking, sleeping, moving the tribe, the same exploration, the same IDing the grasses and the branches and the rocks on the floor. And that was the best part of another 20 hours after that, where it just felt like I was just going through the motions, trying to get over that evolutionary line to finish the game. There was also a lot of backtracking over the map, because when you do choose to evolve, it also moves your settlement location to somewhere, I don't think it's exactly random, but it moves it on, and not necessarily in the direction you were planning to go, which did mean that it split my exploration phases up, and when I'd completed one end of the map, I found I had to trek all the way back to a couple of spots that I'd left at the opposite far end of the map. You know that elongated shape I mentioned earlier? It meant it took hours of trekking about, trying to drag the tribe with me as well. And that's another little issue. Your tribe mates are absolute morons, especially in the start of the game. Sometimes they won't eat or drink, even if they're starving or thirsty, because they've got an item in their right hand. You have to either go and take it off them, switch characters to one of them and manually make them drink, or just get them to drop the weapons or whatever, just to trigger that. There's a lot of babysitting goes on with them. When you move the tribe, they're constantly getting attacked by animals, and you're having to patch up the bleeds and the broken legs, and it slows the whole game down. I found managing these imbeciles just too much of a pain, really. It could have been a good idea going off with hunting parties of them, And you can do that, and generally it does work, but you will find yourself babysitting them a lot of the time. And there's a couple of points that could be either good or bad depending on your view of things. The map being huge, it's great if you love exploring in games like this. There's some vast areas and wonderful sights to behold, but also it's so big you feel a lot of the time you're just going across the same stuff that's just made bigger for the sake of it. There's nothing really new to discover and do there. So that depends on your point of view. And also, the game gives you very little information on how to do anything. Sometimes even how the development and evolution mechanics work as well. Now, for those of you who like the thrill of discovery of working things out, again, that's great. For those of you who are utterly frustrated at such things and can't progress or just need a bit of help, then you're going to find that a bit of a problem. And I found it because I couldn't unlock some of the neural pathways, which, as it turns out, weren't necessary to do them all to finish the game and finish the evolutionary period. And as far as I could tell, there was no explanation anywhere in the game which would have advised me and told me what to do. Also, there's not a lot of information out on the internet about this, as it is so new. So there are some bits that you can get completely stuck with. So overall, would I recommend Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey? Well, it's actually quite hard to say yes or no. If you'd asked me at the halfway point of this game, I'd have said yes without a doubt. I was having so much fun and I absolutely loved it. However, after having to finish the last 20 hours of the game, it just felt like a pretty repetitive grind, and it felt like I was just playing and doing stuff over and over and over again, just for the sake of trying to get over the finish line, rather than really enjoying what was left of the game and what it had to offer. I will say, if you are a survival and exploration game fanatic, you will probably really like it. But for anyone else, well, it might not be your cup of tea at all. Right now, I'm not particularly thrilled at the prospect of going back to play through it all over again. Everything's going to be pretty much in the same place, all the items will be done the same way, there's not going to be much variety for a second playthrough. You can create custom games and start off in different locations on the map, or just start off with a single ancestor and try and locate the rest of the tribe as you explore the world. But really, all the gameplay, all the actions, all the crafting, and all the locations of the special items and meteorites and special gems to find in there, they're all going to be exactly the same as far as I can tell. So don't think the replay value is really there in this game. But I definitely got 20 to 25 good hours of solid entertainment out of this before it started to feel repetitive and grindy. So, take that as you will. And speaking of streaming, up next I'll be playing through Gears 5 and then the new RPG Greedfall over the next couple of weeks over on Twitch. So do please drop me a follow and come and watch along with me on there and join in the conversation and help me make my mind up on whether these games are worth playing or not.